Jed Hoyer had his end of the year press conference, and rather than break down what was basically uninformative and kind of boring from a press conference from Jed, I'd like to take this time to actually grade Jed. We're going to go through all the acquisitions, all of the trades, all of the things that he did over the 2025 season, and give him a final grade and how he can improve for next year. Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Kyle Stanley here with the Setup Man, and even though we're kind of in a post-Cubs season lull and we're still in the playoffs, by the way, go Dodgers. Ugh, for the first time I've ever said that. Can't wait to see the Brewers go down here in 4 games maybe. Would ultimately like to see the Seattle Mariners win, just FYI. Let me know who you want to win the World Series. I would like to take a moment because Jed Hoyer did his post-season conference. I think it's important to talk about Jed right now because that was a major thing. It always is a major thing for him to address the media. Again, I don't want to really get into what he talked about, mainly just because Jed has to give all the politically correct answers. He can't talk about who he's going to extend, who he's going to be in contract talks with, who he's going to be trading. None of that was talked about. It was revealing on a few different fronts that I'll just touch on for a second. But again, my main thing is I want to get into, as you can see on your screen here, all of the players that basically had seasons which were impacted by the fact that they were on the Cubs because of Jed Hoyer bringing them onto the team. So really quickly here, I did link the entire press conference down below in the description from Fox, believe it or not. Marquee, I don't understand why you don't post full conferences. It was on your network. For those of us that don't live in the greater Illinois area, we don't have access to Marquee. So please just help us. Get us some footage outside of just a couple clips from it. We'd really like to see the whole thing. Or give us an opportunity to become a subscriber of Marquee. Guess what? I would do that. I, again, want to do a breakdown of how Jed did. I'm going to have not a letter grade, but more so an overall score. I'll tell you, this is kind of how I decided to grade it. Maybe you agree with it, maybe you don't, but this is how I decided to do it. Long story short, there were preseason acquisitions that made impacts, and there were trade deadline acquisitions that made or lacked their making impacts. Then there was also some kind of, you could say, guys that either got away or we let go away. And then there was just some overall things that I think as an organization, when you look at the job that he did outside of just the players, what organizationally did he do well or not so well? And that will kind of be the bonus because I really want to base as much of this off of the players' performance as possible. And there's some good things to talk about. There's some bad things to talk about, right? You had your standouts that you had no idea were going to do well, like the Drew Pomeranzes of the world. And then you had the guys like Ryan Presley that you were really leaning on. And unfortunately, you gave up a little bit of prospect capital for. And then we'll have a bonus round for that entire organizational piece. So let's just go step by step here. I'm on Baseball Reference. Love me some Baseball Reference. And I'm just going to start with Carson Kelly. Carson Kelly, by the way, all the preseason ones, they're going to get a score out of 10. All the trade deadline ones are going to get a score out of 4. And that's basically because, they were basically a part of the Cubs for a third of the season, and a score of 1 to 3 just felt like it was too restrictive. So I decided to do a score of 1 to 4. So on a score of 1 to 10, Carson Kelly there the entire year, I'm giving that a 9 out of 10. That was a player that we did not expect to do well. We thought he would be the backup catcher. It was kind of this 1A, 1B thing. He predominantly ended up being the number one catcher, mainly because of injuries from Miguel Amaya, but also production. 17 home runs from a guy who was batting third and fourth a large part of the season that you thought was probably just going to be a number 8 or number 9 batter like most of the catchers were in 2024. Huge numbers, part of this core group of Cubs that as a catching group ended up hitting, I believe it was 30 home runs, maybe even a tick above. Incredible upgrade from what we had last year at the catcher's position. So Carson Kelly, number 1. As you go down the list, you can see all these guys were either internal. I'm not going to count Matt Shaw because he's been an internal guy. That's not an acquisition. I'm only talking about acquisitions from this year. So, of course, Kyle Tucker is the next one. Kyle Tucker is a tough one because you saw what impact he made for the beginning of the season and how many wins that led to the Cubs getting in April and May. And then he was fine in June and then just kind of fell off the earth. Let's just be honest there. So, first half, Kyle Tucker's a 10 out of 10. Made everyone better. Jed even admitted that in the press conference, by the way. And then in the second half, he was pretty much the reason why the Cubs offense was really bad. Sorry to put that kind of pressure on him, but that's just kind of the fact. So overall, I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. I truly do not believe that we get the first wild card position. Maybe we get the third wild card position without him if it had just been Cody Bellinger staying there. Even though he had a great year, I think a lot of that had to do with Yankee Stadium as well. I think that if it was not for Kyle Tucker, we would probably be at best second wild card seed, and you saw how much of an impact the home field played for the Cubs. So for that reason, he had an impact. It sucked that he went downhill towards the second half, but anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on each of these players, but that was one that I felt like needed a little bit more time. Justin Turner, because of the clubhouse presence, because of the impact that he had on younger players like Matt Shaw and PCA, guys like that, I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. He was only $6 million. He was a guy that you didn't expect to. You expected more offensively. I definitely expected more than the 602 OPS and only 3 home runs. I thought he would make more of an impact offensively on this team. But from a leadership perspective, I don't think you can measure that. So for that reason, I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. You could argue that that should only account for maybe a 6 out of 10, but that's where I'm at. Reese McGuire, where did he come from? Holy cow, 9 out of 10. Like a guy who, when Miguel Amaya went down, you saw Reese McGuire coming up instead of Moises Ballesteros, and you're like, what are we doing here? And he produced. I mean, for a guy that you would have expected to not have more than a couple home runs, put up 9 home runs, a 688 OPS. Everything he did was just like, the expectation was low, so the production from what you got from him was just so shocking that he has to get that next one up being a 9 out of 10 for me. Next up, Willie Castro. I'm getting midseason acquisition, score out of 4. I'm giving you a 1 out of 4. I would like to give you a 2 out of 4 just because of the versatility. However, the bat was just so bad that it just kind of negates everything for me. A 485 OPS? Are you freaking kidding me? A 170 batting average? A 240 slug? He hit 1 home run. It was a big one. It was against the Brewers. It was a 3-run homer, but that was about it. Man, he was such a letdown. Okay, moving on. John Birdie, speaking of letdowns, holy cow. Yeah, this is a 1 out of 10. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I gave it a 2 out of 10, and the only reason is because he was just such a dominant pitcher. No, I'm just kidding. He brought some flexibility. He brought some speed. He still had 11 stolen bases. There was some positive in there, but I mean, this was a guy that was supposed to be a contact hitter. And I mean, I remember there was a couple games where he was 0 for 4 with 3 or 4 strikeouts. And it's just not, that's just not acceptable. In 107 plate appearances, he struck out 22 times. That's basically a 20% strikeout rate from a guy who, career average, I don't know what it is, but it's definitely under 20%. Okay, next up on the list, Vidal Brujan. You talk about a guy that was on this roster for far too many days. What were we doing? What were we thinking? 1 out of 10. And you could say, well, he brought speed. He brought versatility. Guys, he had 2 stolen bases. He had basically the same production offensively as John Birdie. No home runs, few extra base hits, played some third base. I believe he played a few outfield spots. That was the whole reason why he was on the roster for so long, was because they wanted him to go to center field if PCA needed a day off. Why not Kevin Alcantara? Why not Owen Casey? I'm sorry. Like, that was just such a waste of a roster spot. So, and as we go here, you can kind of tell, like, some of this is in Jed's control. Some of it's not. We didn't expect John Birdie and Justin Turner and Vidal Brujan to be that bad offensively. We thought there would be some production. So this has to be taken with a grain of salt as well. Just giving Jed a little bit of flexibility here, a little bit of grace. But at the same time, guys like John Birdie and Vidal Brujan staying on the roster for as long as they did was inexcusable. All right, we're moving over to the pitchers now. And again, I did forget to mention this. I'm needing to use a little bit of a minimum here. So from a pitcher's standpoint, we're going 10 games minimum. From a position player standpoint, we're going 30 games minimum. Anything under that, we're going to put in the honorable mentions if it's even worth mentioning. So guys like Nicky Lopez, Carlos Santana, Gage Workman, those guys do not belong in this category. They just didn't play enough. So for that reason, I really, truly can't give Jed a grade on that. All right. Sorry, I forgot to mention that in the beginning. From a pitcher's standpoint, Matt Boyd, holy cow. I mean, what do you say about Matt Boyd? I'm giving him a 10 out of 10. He was an all-star. He had the most innings pitched on this staff. He had the lowest ERA outside of Cade Horton, who pitched in how many games less than Boyd? 8 games less. So, and what is that? 61 innings less as well. So there's just to me, like, yes, Cade Horton was the best, but Matt Boyd consistently, outside of a bad September, was the Cubs' most reliable pitcher. He came up and had the best start in the playoffs for the Cubs. This is a guy who gets a 10 out of 10 for me. Next up, Colin Ray. Here's the thing. I mean, Jed deserves some serious credit here. Look at this is organized by innings pitched. The top 2 innings pitched players on this team were offseason acquisitions. Now, of course, we didn't expect Justin Steele to go down. We didn't expect Shota Imanaga to be on the shelf for 6 weeks. We didn't expect Jamison Tyone to be on the shelf for 6 to 8 weeks. Didn't expect those things. But when Matthew Boyd and Colin Ray are number 1 and number 2 in innings pitched, if you would have told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have said this was not a very good season. So the fact that not only were they number 1 and number 2 in innings pitched, but they produced. Colin Ray, aside from a few bad starts, was incredibly consistent. You could argue that this was Colin Ray's best season, and what a bargain. $5 million, I believe, with a team option for next year. They're picking that up for sure. I mean, I want to give him like a 10 out of 10. The only thing is because I don't know. I've got an 8 out of 10 here. Let me know what you think about Colin Ray. You could argue because the expectations were so low that this should be a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to argue that just when you match up everything, a 3.95 ERA, and there was a stretch there where he really wasn't reliable, that's why I'm just going to say I'm at an 8 out of 10, which is way better than I would have expected. I didn't expect Colin Ray to be an 8 out of 10 from a grade scale. How about Brad Keller? Easy choice here. Best bullpen arm all year long. He's a 10 out of 10. Easy choice there. Easy choice. Saving games during the regular season, at the end, during the postseason. A guy whose career was in the tank. Tyler Zombro, I remember we had him on the show, and literally right before we went live, he was like, "We got Brad Keller." And I was like, "Who?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know, but just believe me, it's going to be good." And he was right. He said the same thing about Caleb Thielbar. I'm giving Caleb Thielbar another 10 out of 10. The 2.64 ERA is actually deceptive because there was a couple outings there at the end of the year that inflated that. He was mainly around that like 210 to 220 almost all year long. Arguably better than Brad Keller. Arguably. And this guy's 38 years old. A lefty, 38 years old, having a resurgent year with the Cubs. Are you kidding me? Oh, man, that was absolutely a 10 out of 10. And then another 10 out of 10, Drew Pomeranz, was in retirement, basically. Hadn't pitched since, 2020, I believe. Comes in, throws 57 games, 2.17 ERA. He started the season off somewhere around 23 innings scoreless to start off. 10 out of 10. Easy. And Ryan Presley, 3 out of 10. Easy decision. Not good. Was on the roster for too long. 44 games. Can you believe Ryan Presley pitched in 44 games? That's only 10 less than Daniel Palencia. I mean, there was also that one game. You take out that one game against the Giants, and it's a respectable ERA. But when you're looking at a strikeout pitcher, right, for his career, who only struck out 28 batters in 41 and a third innings, not the guy that you want at the back of your bullpen. And I think the Astros knew that. I think they knew that they were getting rid of a guy who was well past his prime, and we still made that trade thinking that this was going to be him and Porter Hodge were going to be the guys in the 8th and the 9th inning. Chris Flexen, I've got down for a 7 out of 10. Shocked all of us. 3.09 ERA got greatly inflated. They had a very short leash on him. Felt like he should have had a few more opportunities with the Cubs. He was part of that Pomeranz and Flexen kind of group that had like a minuscule ERA through their first 10 to 15 games, and then he kind of inflated that. They let him go, but I got a 7 out of 10, and the only reason it's not more is because he just didn't play much for the rest of the season. You've got Ryan Brazier up next. Battled injuries all year long, mainly groin stuff right out of the gate. Wasn't really great when he was in there, so I'm giving him a 3 out of 10. Now, back to a trade deadline acquisition. You got Andrew Kittredge, who in 21 and 2/3 innings had a 3.32 ERA with the Cubs. And again, you take out one game. It was one game where you gave up 4 runs, and you're looking at an ERA in the ones. But I'm giving Andrew Kittredge, again, we got to do this out of a scale of 4. I'm giving him a 3 out of 4. He had some clutch saves for the Cubs, 5 saves. Outside of Daniel Palencia and Ryan Presley, that was number 2 on the team, tied with Ryan Presley for number 2. Didn't expect him to close games. Didn't expect him to close games in the playoffs, but that was the position that he was put in, and he did a really great job. He shockingly did a great job. A guy that when we traded for him, he was going through a nice stretch. You thought to yourself, yeah, but this guy's 35 years old. Is this really going to be an impact arm? It was impactful enough. We'll say that. And then Taylor Rogers, I'm sorry, that's a 1 out of 4. That's a 1 out of 4. That was bad. Came in with really good numbers. I thought to myself, hey, this guy is going to battle with Thielbar for some high leverage situations. Never happened. And when he was put in those situations, it didn't go well. And you might notice, because the Cubs did get Michael Soroka at the deadline, who was fine, 1.08 ERA in 8 1/3 innings. But because of him only being in for a little bit of time, he's going to lead us into our honorable mentions. Our honorable mentions are Michael Soroka, and I'm just giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down. A thumbs up or a thumbs down. Michael Soroka, thumbs down, because Jed did not do all the homework on why was his velocity down. Major thumbs down. You give up a couple mid-level prospects. One wasn't going to go anywhere with the Cubs. The other one might go somewhere. And you just straight up didn't do the homework. And Jed even admitted, like, that one's on me. Not acceptable, thumbs down. You got Aaron Savali. Okay, where is he at? This was good stuff. 2.08 ERA in 13 innings. The Cubs had a comeback win, and a lot of that was because Aaron Savali threw, I believe it was 3 or 4 shutout innings. It was only 5 games, but it made a major impact. Thumbs up for sure. Didn't think that we were going to see anything out of that guy. From a position player standpoint, going back to those position players, a thumbs down for both Carlos Santana and Gage Workman. Thumbs down, double thumbs down, both of them. The Gage Workman experiment, I think you could argue it should have happened. I argue that they just should have picked up someone else. I just thought that was a weird decision to take a guy who had never played a single inning in AAA and say, Rule 5 draft, sure, we got this guy Matt Shaw, but you can be our backup. It just seemed weird to me. I would have much rather had a veteran third baseman. There were guys like Paul DeYoung out there that you thought, hey, they could come in and they could, kind of navigate that with Matt Shaw, and they didn't do anything like that. I'm not putting Nicky Lopez on this list, mainly just because I guess I'll if I need to be consistent, I guess I need to be consistent. Nicky Lopez, thumbs down. I mean, look at the numbers. They were not good. He was mainly going to be there for defense. I guess I'm just kind of like about it. If I could give a sideways thumbs, I would do that on him. But if a gun's put to my head, I'm thumbs down on Nicky Lopez, Carlos Santana, and Gage Workman. Now let's play a little game called Who Got Away, and this is all of the players that went somewhere else and made an impact here in 2025. Cam Smith, overall numbers were not very good. Of course, he goes off against the Cubs because that's just the way that it works. I believe he had 2 home runs in that series against the Astros. But when you look at the overall numbers, the number one thing that I cared about was Cam Smith going to have a better season than Matt Shaw? And I would say that Cam Smith did not have a better season than Matt Shaw. He is a Gold Glove finalist, which I didn't see any of his stuff in right field. So maybe you guys saw. Let me know your thoughts on that. I thought that was kind of random. But Matt Shaw, also a Gold Glove finalist. Matt Shaw had more home runs. He had more slug. He had a higher OPS. He just basically did everything better than Cam Smith, whether it was marginally or majorly in 2025, despite having a rough first half. We could have looked at Cam Smith's numbers and Matt Shaw's in the first half and been like, well, this was a bad decision. We should have traded Matt Shaw. At the end of 2025, I think the right decision was made. If you had to get rid of one of them, if you had to get rid of one of them, I think the right decision was made. So Cam Smith, I'm grading these the three in terms of 10. I'm giving this one it's tough because I do think he's going to be a star moving forward. I think this first year he was put in a difficult position to try to produce for a team that had a hole in right field. He'd never really played much right field. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. I don't really know why. I'm sorry, but I don't think it's great, and I don't think it's terrible. So I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. There you go. Next up, Cody Bellinger. Oh, Cody Bellinger. My goodness. What happened to you this year? Great numbers. Really great numbers. Nearly 100 RBIs. 125 OPS plus, which was an 813 OPS overall. 272 batting average. He slugged 480. You put him and Kyle Tucker next to each other, and you just look at straight up the numbers, you say to yourself, we should have just held on to Cody Bellinger. Though they did save some money by going with Kyle Tucker, but again, they lost Cam Smith in the process. I don't think Cody Bellinger puts up this kind of year. I think Cody Bellinger would have a almost dead-on same numbers minus the on-base percentage. His OPS would probably be in the mid-700s had he been with the Cubs. I think a lot of this had to do with Yankee Stadium. But because you had to get rid of Cam Smith, because Cody put up a good year, and because this was probably a money move more than anything, I thought it was a bad move. I am giving it a 2 out of 10. Would I do the Kyle Tucker thing again and again? Absolutely, but I'm only grading this based on the final result. Had Cody Bellinger had a bad year, different situation. I'm grading this on the fact that Kyle Tucker had arguably a worse season than Cody Bellinger from a production standpoint, and you had Cody on your team. So for that reason, I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. Isak Paredes, this is an easy decision. He wasn't going to be good with the Cubs, even though he had a fairly solid season with the Astros. I believe he was even an all-star this year. It just wasn't going to happen with the Cubs. It wasn't. That 20 home runs would have been like 11. And he ended up getting hurt. I believe he was only in, let's see, how many games did he play? He only played in 102 games. So, right decision. Wasn't going to make a difference on this team. It would have just been blocking Matt Shaw. So, I'm giving that a 10 out of 10. Mr. Tauchman. Remember Mike Tauchman? Mike Tauchman, I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. Once again, I liked the move because I thought it was going to make room for a guy like Kevin Alcantara or Owen Casey to get more playing time. It obviously did not, which is disappointing. So for that reason, I'm not giving it a good grade. He had a very solid season when he did play. He had a hamstring issue. He had a couple injury issues. So I believe he only played in about 90-ish games. Could have been a really great asset for the Cubs. But I also think it was time to move on from Mike Tauchman. Mike Tauchman was not going to be a quote-unquote difference maker on this team. And when you look at it, basically the fourth outfielder all year long was Seiya. So what do? You really have a fifth outfielder? I don't think that would have worked. So Mike Tauchman, I thought was the right move, but again, I wouldn't have been upset if he was still with the team. So that's why I'm giving it kind of a blah of 5 out of 10. Kyle Hendricks, it was time to move on from him. That's a 10 out of 10. Didn't have a good season. It was fine. 4.76 ERA, 164 and 2/3. But I'm telling you right now, you put him in our starting rotation, and you're upset with those numbers. You're upset that Kyle Hendricks is getting 31 starts with a nearly 5 ERA. The guy that we complain about the most in terms of consistent starts all year long was probably Colin Ray, and his ERA was almost a full point lower than Kyle Hendricks. So, outside of Ben Brown, was a quick experiment, and they took him out of the rotation, so I'm not going to compare him to that. All right. So all of this together from a player's standpoint, what does this all add up to? So the first set of players was a 97 out of 140. This was the preseason. Then at the trade deadline, you got a 5 out of 12. You got honorable mentions here. I'm just going to do that. This is a 1 out of 4 is what we'll just call that. And then you got a 32 out of 50 from the who got away standpoint. So overall, 97 plus 5, 102, 103, and 135 out of 140, 152, 156, 206. So 135 divided by 206. If you're going to do this as a grade level, right? And you're basically looking at a D. But I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can say that this is a D just because this is a really hard job to hit on every single player. That's an impossible standard to set. So 135 out of 206, like if it's me, I'm probably like if I was having to put a letter grade on this, I'm probably giving this a B, maybe even a B plus, just because of how outstanding the pitching was. I mean, the hits on the pitching outside of Ryan Brazier and Ryan Presley were all phenomenal. Look at that. 8 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 on all of them except for Brazier and Ryan Presley. Basically, just don't bring anyone named Ryan in. That's probably the goal moving forward. That's what they're putting up on the chalkboard. The Ryans don't work. I think because of that factor alone, this makes this a really difficult decision of what you would put a grade on. But I'm gonna go with a B plus. Now I did tell you we were gonna do a little bit of a bonus section, so I'm gonna name off about 5 or 6 things here and just add it to the bonus of all of this. The first one that I thought was a major failure was the failed opportunity to extend Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm giving this a 3 out of 10 only because I thought it was really big of the Cubs to actually have that kind of conversation. That was shocking to me. You saw the Corbin Carrolls and the Jackson Churios of the world getting these types of extensions before they even, in Churios' position, he hadn't even seen a major league pitch. Corbin Carroll got that when he had only played half a season. The fact that they were trying to do that with Pete Crow Armstrong, I thought was impressive. I thought it was a big move by the organization. The fact that they failed and really didn't sound like they were even close from the reports that we heard was the failure. You probably could have locked this guy up for about 8 years at 120. I think that probably would have gotten the job done. And now we're going to have him for probably the next 4 years. I don't know when his free agency actually starts, and he's going to want to go get the massive money. And he's probably going to deserve it at that point because he's going to have a couple platinum gloves. He's going to have 200 plus stolen bases. He's going to probably be around 100 plus home runs, 150 extra base hits, somewhere around there by the end of this 4-year stretch. And that's going to be a tough guy to lose out on. Next factor, and most important, they made the playoffs. This is a 7 out of 10. Why is it not more? Well, because they didn't go that deep, and they were honestly really not in a great position to succeed in the playoffs. Even if they had Cade Horton was not even part of the original plan. And so for that reason, I just felt like the starting pitching was really a lacking spot that Jed never truly got locked in. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. It could have been worse if they had been 2 and out or 3 and out in that first round. Probably a 5 out of 10. Next, failed to get an impact starter at the trade deadline. Absolutely a 4 out of 10. Should, to a lot of you, probably be 1 out of 10. But the fact that the market was so expensive for starting pitching at this trade deadline, and you saw no one with control end up going in this trade deadline, I'm going to give him a little bit of grace. But I still thought that your only guy that you picked up at the trade deadline as a quote-unquote starter was Michael Soroka, and that's not good enough. That's not a serious move. That's not a we want to win now kind of move. And so that was a failure. How about blocking prospects? I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros specifically. When you are not DFAing John Birdie, when you're not DFAing Vidal Brujan, and you're going and acquiring guys down the stretch like Carlos Santana, I just don't think that you have fully understood how to utilize your prospects. I'm not a GM, I'm not a baseball of operations guy. I don't think I have the right to say all this, but I also do think at some level there is you got to make a freaking decision. Are they trade bait or are they going to play on your team? Because there was, during the trade deadline, multiple reports saying that Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros are untouchable. Okay, great, then play them. Moises Ballesteros looked like a major league hitter every single time he was up here. That back-to-back that he went with Ian Happ, what was that, 460? And he went like 115 off the bat. This guy's a major league hitter. Owen Casey had some of the biggest hits in that Milwaukee series, some of the biggest at-bats in that Milwaukee series, and then he's not even playing after that. And when he does play, he gets a concussion. This was a mismanaged opportunity to get some youth, to make not only an opportunity for them to get experience in a playoff run, but also to make an impact. When you have a guy like Seiya Suzuki hitting as horribly as he was, Kyle Tucker being injured, and you're still not bringing Owen Casey up to fill that void, then just trade him. Do something. That's not, if his value is not on the field, then his value is going to be getting a starting pitcher, and you just didn't do that. You didn't do that. That was a 2 out of 10. Two more here. Failed to add starting pitching depth in the offseason. Yeah, you got Colin Ray. Yeah, you got Matthew Boyd. And I'm only talking about starting pitching depth, not overall pitching. But you didn't factor in that there was going to be some injuries. It is 2025. Pitchers get injured. Justin Steele down for the season. Tyone and Shota out for 6+ weeks. Cade Horton ends up getting injured. Wasn't even a factor in this team until middle of the season. What if Cade Horton had not done what he did? Look, think of how bleak the starting rotation looks then. It was just a really bad job of getting starters. The only reason I'm giving this a 4 out of 10 is because Matthew Boyd and Colin Ray, the 2 acquisitions, did really pitch their asses off. And for that reason, I am giving him a 4 out of 10. And I'm going to give an 8 out of 10 to the bullpen configuration. Wow. I'm just still flabbergasted. Yes, I use the word flabbergasted. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 because April was just miserable. One of the worst bullpens in all of April. It just took too long for them to figure out. Eli Morgan, of course, the honorable mention. I should have mentioned him there. Thumbs down. But the rest of the bullpen, Nate Pearson, Porter Hodge, all those guys that didn't figure it out, that was part of the issue. But at the same time, there was some pretty obvious things in the beginning when you saw Colin Ray pitching well, you saw Brad Keller pitching well, you thought to yourself, these guys should be getting more leverage situations, and it just took a little bit too long for that to happen. And but I mean, when they did, Pomeranz and Thielbar and Keller, these guys, Palencia, they all did their job, and they did it to a higher expectation than we could have ever expected. So all this being said, all these 6 categories being added up, it just kind of brings us right around that same score. 28 out of 60 brings it down a little bit. So again, I'm still giving a B+ to Jed. Now, what could he do to do even better next year? It's 5 things. It's 5 simple things. Get more starting pitching, high impact starting pitching. Clear bullpen picture going into April. I don't want to go in for the 3rd or 4th straight year of what does our bullpen look like. We think this is what it looks like, but we'll find out in April. That's not good enough. Building for 95+ win teams, not 90 win teams. That's the biggest thing. And I don't think we're ever going to get that with Jed, mainly just because of Tom, not because of Jed. But I really believe that this team is just comfortable at this 87 and 90 win projection. And if they overperform, they're going to do that. You heard Carter Hawkins through Gordon Whitmire say that the other day. And to me, 95+ wins, it should be the goal, especially when the Brewers are doing that with, a 1/5 of the payroll, if that. It's inexcusable to me that we're not trying to win 95+ games. And more impact moves at the deadline would be number 4. You got to be more aggressive at the deadline. It was not... I know there's a lot of excuses for this deadline. Starting pitching was expensive. There wasn't enough bats. There wasn't enough bullpen guys. The bullpen guys were even more expensive than we wanted. I get it, but if you're going to tell your entire fan base that if we're in it at the deadline, we're going to make moves, and then you really don't, then just don't say that to begin with. Sorry. And then, like I already said, better use of prospects. I just want to see Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros. Maybe you can include Kevin Alcantara in this. They deserve a major league opening day 26-man roster spot next year. They absolutely deserve it. If it's not with the Cubs, don't put them back in AAA. They don't deserve that. This group of guys deserves to be on a major league roster. Give them that by either putting them in there. I know fans aren't going to like that. Hey, bye-bye Kyle Tucker. Hello, Owen Casey. That's our starting right fielder. There's a lot of question marks around that, for sure. There would be a lot less question marks around that had you just played him more this last year when Seiya Suzuki couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, when Kyle Tucker was injured. And, of course, Moises Ballesteros has the catching, the defensive things that you're just not sure about at the moment. But at the end of the day, you got to figure out what the path is for them. Either get rid of them and get some good starting pitching in return, or put them in the roster. All right, this was a longer one, but I think this was necessary for grading Jed in full. Let me know what you think. How would you grade him? Again, I'm right around a B+. I want to know what you think.